Ever wonder what happens when competition for a government project gets a little too convenient?
Convenient.
Yeah, like some bidders just back out at the last minute.
Leaving only one company to win the bid.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Is that suspicious, or is it just, how business works sometimes?
Well, that's the question at the heart of this Philippine Supreme Court case we're diving into today.
Jaspe and Araneta v. Public Assistance and Corruption Prevention Office.
This case really digs into the whole world of government bidding and whether some officials might have crossed the line.
Allegations of misconduct, legal twists and turns.
And a Supreme Court decision that, well, you might find it surprising.
Okay, so let's set the scene first. 2006, Municipality of Santa Barbara in Iloilo.
They're looking to get some infrastructure projects done.
Concreting some roads, asphalt paving, even a whole new fish section for the market.
Pretty standard stuff for a local government.
Right.
Right. But here's where things start to get interesting. We have 3 bidders initially. AFG Construction.
Topmost Development Marketing Corporation, TDMC for short.
And F. Garea Construction, or FGCI. Seems like healthy competition at first.
But then, on the day of the bidding...
Things get a little, shall we say, murky.
Murky is a good word for it. So AFG, they drop out verbally.
Promise to give a formal notice later.
Okay. Then, both TDMC and FGCI submit letters.
Saying they won't bid on certain specific projects.
They said their cost estimates went over the approved budget.
Right.
So now, if you were on that Bids and Awards Committee, the BAC...
Wouldn't you be a little suspicious?
At least a little, right?
Well, one BAC member definitely was, Sonza.
He questioned these last-minute withdrawals.
Absolutely. Argued they should have happened way earlier.
Exactly.
Even suggested there might be some maneuvering going on behind the scenes.
Ooh.
He recommended they just scrap the whole bidding process and start over.
So he's basically waving a giant red flag.
Exactly. But the BAC chair, Lindoffer Bube, he saw it differently. He argued that having a single bidder was still okay, legally speaking.
Even if it looks a little fishy.
Especially, he said, if the other bidders backed out for legitimate reasons. So ultimately, the BAC decided to move forward.
With TDMC and FGCI as the sole bidders for different projects. So
Yeah.
we've got a lone bidder winning.
Yeah.
You might think case closed.
Not so fast.
Because now enters Agustin Sonza Jr. He files a complaint with the Office of the Ombudsman.
Alleging serious irregularities in the process.
Pointing fingers at the mayor, BOP, TDMC, and FGCI.
Now, the Office of the Ombudsman, they're like the watchdog for any government misconduct in the Philippines.
Right. They investigate those complaints against officials and can recommend sanctions, potentially.
In this case, they brought in the Commission on Audit, the COA, to do a special audit of the bidding.
Okay, so what did they find? What did the COA uncover?
Well, they concluded that the BAC did allow those bid withdrawals after the deadline.
Which is against the rules.
Big no-no. But there's more. They also found potential links between TDMC and FGCI.
Like what?
Some overlapping board members. They shared engineers. And get this,
Okay.
They even had the same office addresses and phone numbers in Manila.
Whoa, that's not a good look.
No, it isn't.
So based on all of this, somebody filed a complaint for grave misconduct.
Against 3 BAC members, Senia Araneta, Noel Jaspe and Ma Negenia Araneta.
And grave misconduct meaning?
It's more than just a simple mistake. It implies intentional wrongdoing, possibly for personal gain.
Or to benefit someone else.
Right. Exactly.
So the accusation was that these BAC members basically rigged the system.
In favor of TDMC and FGCI?
Depriving the government of a truly competitive bidding process.
And that's where things get really serious.
Just because now we're not talking about just a slap on the wrist.
Oh, no. The Office of the Ombudsman Visayas, after reviewing all the evidence, they found Jaspe, Araneta, and Apuan guilty.
Guilty of grave misconduct.
They were dismissed from service, stripped of their eligibility for government position,
Lost their retirement benefits.
and permanently barred from holding public office.
Wow, those are some serious consequences.
Serious indeed. But of course, the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
No. Jaspe and Araneta, they decided to fight back.
They appealed their case.
First to the Court of Appeals, and then all the way up to the Supreme Court.
And that is where things take a very unexpected turn. Welcome back. So we left off with Jaspe and Araneta facing some pretty serious consequences after being found guilty of grave misconduct.
Right, but they weren't giving up just yet.
Taking their case all the way to the Supreme Court of the Philippines.
And this is where things get really interesting, I think.
This is the case of Jaspe and Araneta v. Public Assistance and Corruption Prevention Office.
GR No. 259940, decided on July 12, 2021.
Okay.
So the Supreme Court actually overturned the Ombudsman and the Court of Appeals decisions.
Wait, so they're saying there was no grave misconduct?
Well, not exactly. They didn't completely disagree that things looked a bit suspicious.
Okay.
What they did was focus on a very specific legal point.
Which was?
Section 26 of a Public Act 9184, that's the law that governs how the Philippine government buys, goods and services. Procurement, basically.
Right.
This section deals with modifying or withdrawing bids.
Yeah.
And it's super clear that any such changes have to happen before the deadline for submitting bids.
So the Ombudsman and the Court of Appeals were saying the BAC messed up by letting those bidders withdraw at the last minute.
Exactly. But the Supreme Court, they took a much closer look at the actions of each bidder. Remember, AFG didn't submit any bid at all.
Right.
And TDMC and FGCI, they just chose not to bid on certain projects.
Right.
And they gave their reasons in writing.
Okay.
So the court's interpretation, this wasn't technically a modification or withdrawal.
How so?
Because there were no actual bids to modify or withdraw in the first place.
Okay. I see the distinction they're making. So those companies didn't change their minds after submitting bids. They just chose not to bid on certain things right from the beginning.
Precisely. And because Section 26 didn't directly apply here, the Supreme Court said it couldn't be used as the basis for finding those BAC members guilty of grave misconduct.
Interesting. It's amazing how the specific legal definitions can really make or break a case.
It really is. And remember, to prove grave misconduct, you have to show intent. It has to be deliberate, done with the purpose of personal gain, or to benefit someone else.
Right.
The Supreme Court wasn't convinced that the BAC's actions met that high bar.
So even if it looked shady, just having a single bidder win doesn't automatically equal collusion.
That's right. They even cited a previous case, Desierto v. Ocampo, which established that you need really strong evidence to prove collusion, not just suspicion. The mere fact that there's one winner doesn't mean there was some shady deal happening in the background.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about all those connections between TDMC and FGCI, though? The shared board members, same engineers, the whole office address thing. Did the Supreme Court just ignore all of that?
They didn't ignore it. They made a crucial point. The BAC members didn't have access to that information during the bidding itself.
Oh, I see.
All they had were the official company documents, which of course showed different directors and addresses.
So they can't be held responsible for information they didn't have.
Right. And the court also pointed out that simply having some overlapping personnel or connections, that doesn't automatically mean there's fraud or collusion happening. You need hard evidence of wrongdoing to back up those accusations.
Wow. So after all that back and forth, the Supreme Court completely cleared Jaspe and Araneta.
And even Upwang, actually.
Upwang, too, even though he hadn't even appealed the decision.
That's right.
What a turn of events.
It really highlights the importance of due process, making sure everyone gets a fair hearing at every level of the legal system. But it also, I think, raises some questions about the clarity of those procurement rules.
And the burden proof in these types of cases, maybe.
Exactly.
We're back, and wow, this case has really been a roller coaster.
It has, hasn't it?
It really seemed like there was enough suspicion to warrant those grave misconduct charges.
You'd think so.
But the Supreme Court really dug into those legal arguments.
They did.
And came to a totally different conclusion.
It really shows how things aren't always what they seem, right?
Right.
Especially with these complex legal matters.
So what does this Jaspe and Araneta decision mean for government bids moving forward?
Well, one big takeaway for me is the importance of having crystal clear rules around bid modifications and withdrawals. The fact that the Supreme Court had to really analyze Section 26 of RA 9184 so closely suggests that maybe those rules could be a bit clearer,
So maybe the municipality should have had stricter guidelines from the get-go, like something that lays out exactly what happens when a bidder wants to change or withdraw their bid.
Exactly. Clearer rules would make it easier for everyone, really.
For the bidders to understand their obligations, and for the BAC to evaluate those last-minute changes, make sure everything's legit.
Right, exactly.
It also makes me think about the pressure on these public officials who are serving on these committees.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to make these tough decisions, sometimes under a lot of pressure and with tight deadlines.
And now it seems like their every move is going to be scrutinized, like what happened in Jaspe and Araneta.
Yeah, it almost makes you hesitant to, act decisively.
I can see that. We definitely need a balance, right,
Okay.
between holding officials accountable, of course,
Uh-huh.
and recognizing that they're human. Honest mistakes happen.
Not every little error is automatically corruption.
Exactly, or some deliberate scheme to rig the system.
This case really highlighted the importance of due process, too.
Absolutely.
Jaspe, Araneta, and Aplong went through the whole legal system,
Ombudsman.
Court of Appeals,
The Supreme Court.
before they were finally cleared.
It's a fundamental principle.
Due process.
Yes, everyone deserves a fair hearing. The evidence needs to be examined carefully, and the law applied consistently. In this case, I'd say it worked.
Even though it was a long road to get there.
A very long road.
Well, I have to say, after this deep dive, I'm left with more questions than answers.
Really?
Did the Supreme Court make the right call? Was justice truly served? I'm not sure I have a definitive answer.
Well, that's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it?
It is.
They make you think critically. You form your own opinions.
That's a great point. So what are your takeaways from Jaspe and Araneta? Head to the comments and let us know what you think.
We'd love to hear your perspectives.
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into Philippine law and government procurement, hit that subscribe button.
And give us a like.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating case, exploring a whole new set of legal challenges and complexities.
Until then, keep those minds engaged. Remember, the pursuit of justice. It's a journey, not a destination.